Good evening, everyone. This is Nathan here, and so today in this video I'd like to be talking a little bit about Romans chapter 13, one of the most abused portions of the Bible. And now, will you flip over with me to Romans chapter 13, where it says, "Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive themselves damnation. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt have the praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. Wherefore ye must needs be subject, not only for wrath, but also for conscience sake." This is verses 1 through 5 in Romans chapter 13, the King James Version, where it says, where Paul is exhorting his brethren to be subject to the higher powers, which are the civil authorities, because the institution of human government is placed there by God. For what? For our protection. The punishment of evildoers, it says in verses 3 and 4. For rulers are not a terror to good works, but to the evil. Wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt praise of the same. For he is the minister of God to thee for good. But if thou do that which is wicked, evil, be afraid, for he beareth not the sword in vain. For he is the minister of God, a revenger to execute wrath upon him that doeth evil. So Paul is saying in verses 3 and 4 that the institution of human government has been placed over us by God for our protection, the punishment of evildoers. And Paul exhorts us to, if we don't want to be afraid of the human authorities, all we have to do is do that which is good, and we will not have to fear them. But if we do that which is evil, we would have to be afraid of them, because we will receive punishment. And he says in verse 5 that now we must be subject to the government, not only for wrath, but also for the sake of our conscience. And so the problem is, too many Christians nowadays have used this as an excuse to support tyrannical governments, where this couldn't be further from the truth, because in proper context, in verses 3 and 4, the most crucial part, perhaps, Paul is only describing a government that is doing what it's supposed to be doing, a just government. But there have been numerous governments throughout history that do not fit the description, that are a terror to good works and not to the evil works. For example, the Soviet Union, North Korea, Maoist China, Nazi Germany. These are examples of what we call police states, where government is a terror to good works, when mass numbers of people are tortured to death. Now, are governments like that of Joseph Stalin's not a terror to good works but to the evil works? Absolutely not. Those are wicked, evil, satanic governments, and the best thing that can happen to a government like that is if someone would overthrow that government. Now, before you say, Nathan, what about Romans chapter 13? Now, once again, like I said, in Romans chapter 13, verses 3 and 4, Paul is only talking about a government that is just, that is having just laws, that is meeting God's standards. And frankly, when a government is massacring Christians and, torturing mass numbers of people to death, this government cannot be counted as a source of protection, but rather is a source of danger. And the reason why so many Christians get confused about Romans chapter 13 is because I've often seen that many ministries would say, oh, Paul wrote that when Nero was on the throne, he was massacring and torturing Christians to death, and he still has to be subject to the government. First of all, would that make any sense? If a government is massacring and torturing Christians, would it really make sense to say, wilt thou then not be afraid of the power? Do that which is good, and thou shalt praise of the same? Absolutely not. And secondly, if this is a government that's massacring Christians, why would Paul even say, let every soul be subject unto the higher powers? Because if this is a government that's massacring Christians, your very act of being a Christian makes you a rebel. I mean, think about why Christians in countries like North Korea and the former Soviet Union were tortured to death in mass numbers. Why? Because their very act of believing in the one true God, Jesus Christ, made them an enemy of the government, made them rebels. Because those governments did not serve God, but rather, they were wicked, evil, and satanic. So this is the reason why so many Christians get confused by Romans 13. I hope I cleared up a lot of misunderstanding in this recording. Thank you.